on the words Vayetze Zaracha Kiafar Haaretz, and this is the promise that Yaakov received. Your seed, your children will be like the dust of the earth, Ufaratsta Yama V'Kema V'Tzfona V'Negba, and they'll spread to all the directions, west and east and north and south. And they'll be blessed through you, all the nations of the world, and through your children. Which, of course, this pasuk sort of, we can say, has a connection to now, in that we're just coming from Tishrei. And this pasuk, actually, the Rebbe added to the Ataharesas, meaning we say the Ataharesas 3 times before our kafos, both nights and by day. We make a big deal about the Ataharesas, and the Rebbe's explained each pasuk extensively and all the godliness is bringing down. And after the 3rd set of Ataharesas, we say this pasuk 3 times. The Rebbe instructed. So this pasuk has tremendous, tremendous power to be literally added by the Rebbe himself to the power of the Ataharesas, to be the introduction to draw down all of the godliness of Hakafos. So our sages say that why was this bracha said to Yaakov, right? He's not the first one that's promised Eretz Yisrael in this week's parsha, actually, in tomorrow's Chitas, right? The of Yerushas Haaretz. Avram Avinu, he inherited the land in a specific measure. Or it says he inherited the world in a specific measure. B'mida. Why? It does not say about Abraham, Shmira Shabbos. It doesn't say about Abraham, Shmira Shabbos. And since it doesn't say about Abraham, Shmira Shabbos, the keeping of the Shabbos, he inherited Eretz Yisrael, or the whole world. But b'mida, with a limited measure. Ufaratsta is burst forth, north, south, west, east, limitless, no measures, burst forth. That's limitless. That's beyond measure. That was given to Yaakov because Yaakov was given Shmira Shabbos. Now, we see this. Well, what are we talking about here? Avram didn't keep Shabbos. We know it says Avram kept the entire Torah. If Avram kept the entire Torah, I think he kept the Shabbos also. And it even says about Avraham, Vayishmor Mishmarti, Mitzvosai, Chukosai, Avraham is blessed because he kept all of my commandments. Literally, we're enumerating here on every level of divine commandment Avraham fulfilled. So surely Avraham kept the Shabbat. But what was special about Yaakov? Because it says about Yaakov, it says about him specifically in the pasuk, his keeping of the Shabbos. That he entered the city right by Shkia, to be able to enter before Shkia, before Shabbos, and to set up a Tchum Shabbos, the boundaries of where one could go because of the laws of Shabbos. So even though, of course, Avraham kept the Shabbos, but Yaakov's keeping of the Shabbos was more pronounced, more specific, more designated, that literally we see in the verse an allusion that Yaakov is keeping Shabbos. And because Yaakov Avinu kept Shabbos in more intense or more designated measure, he merits limitless. There's something about the Shabbos, this is what we're going to focus on here, and limitless. That his Yerushas Haaretz, his inheritance of the land of Israel, will be ufaratsta, will be limitless. So of course, that's what the Mimer wants to explore. What is it about Shabbos that creates this limitless energy that translates into ufaratsta, a limitless extension in Eretz Yisrael? Similarly, the Rebbe says, we see in the Gemara that it says, Kol ha'aneges haShabbos, whoever delights in the Shabbos, or another version of the Gemara, Kol ha'sameches haShabbos, whoever has this joy in the Shabbos, or it says in the Gemara, another version, Kol ha'ochel gimel su'udos b'Shabbos, whoever is careful to eat all 3 meals on Shabbos, a challenge for us Lubavitchers, I know, Friday night and Shabbos day, and something for Shalosh Shudas. Of course, you can say, what's the big deal? The Alter Rebbe makes it so easy. True. But we do have to have those 2 Su'udas by day plus the Su'udah by night. Zoiche l'nachalas Yaakov. Again, some deep connection to Yaakov and Shmira Shabbos, that if we take delight in Shabbos, if we take joy in Shabbos, if we rejoice and have these 3 meals on Shabbos, we're connecting to the energy of Yaakov. And what is special about the energy of Yaakov, as we just said? Nachala b'li mitzara, something limitless. There's some limitless capacity connecting to Shmir Shabbos, connecting to Yaakov, connecting to us as we tie into this energy by really rejoicing in the Shabbos. For me, this is really easy because Shabbos is my best day of the week, like it's been, I don't know, for the past, 30, 35 or plus years. Oh, do I love Shabbos. So maybe depending on our age and stage, Shabbos is easier to just really rejoice in. And maybe when you're younger, it seems like, and for us, it seems like, whoa, this is so wonderful. But there's a special bracha to really take pleasure in the Shabbos. And that bracha connects to limitless. Now, the Rebbe says, now we have a question. It seems a little odd, this concept. What seems odd here? Shabbos is time-bound, meaning we're saying, because Yaakov kept Shabbos, Avram, of course, kept Shabbos, but because Yaakov kept Shabbos in a more distinguished fashion, Haraya, the pasuk itself, alludes to his keeping Shabbos, he gets limitless Eretz Yisrael. Because we rejoice and have pleasure and have joy and have the 3 meals of Shabbos, we tap into this limitless energy. The Rebbe says, what does Shabbos have to do with limitless? Shabbos is as time-bound as it gets. It's a specific day. It enters on a specific day, a specific time. It exits on a specific day, a specific time. So why would something so time-bound, so within the concept of time, of course, our world, not God's reality, but our world reality, everywhere we look, we bump into the boxes called time and space. So in a sense, everything's time-bound. That's our world. But in terms of Avodas Hashem, some things escape the constraints of time, so to speak. Meaning, you could have a mitzvah like Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, Emunas Hashem, commandments of loving, fearing, believing in God that are constant mitzvahs. They're not restricted to a now and not a then to a later. There's no time element. It's constant. But Shabbos would be almost like an expression of a very special time-bound mitzvah. It's interesting talking about how special Shabbos is. It was very unusual. Someone I know, not religious man, elderly man, he sent me a question. He's like, I asked my Chabad rabbi and he didn't know, but maybe you or your husband would know. What was his question? He says, why does Shabbos have more aliyahs? I guess he noticed this in his Chabad shul. Why does Shabbos have more aliyahs than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I was like, ChatGPT, let me find the answer, right? So ChatGPT plus, thank you, my husband, to confirm that, you can't just trust ChatGPT. My husband fleshed it out a bit more, but I explained to him that we, as we understand the world, we think, whoa, a holiday, a Pesach, a Shavuos, or for sure Rosh Hashanah. Wow, the highlights. But Shabbos is more holy. Haraya, you can cook on Rosh Hashanah, you can cook on Pesach, and you can't cook on Shabbos. Okay, well, what about Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is Shabbos, Shabbos. On Yom Kippur, you can't cook either. True, but Yom Kippur doesn't have the element of pleasure because you can't eat on Yom Kippur. So a regular Yontif, including Rosh Hashanah, 5 aliyahs. Yom Kippur is creeping up the ladder because it's really like Shabbos, 6, but you can't eat. So you don't have also the einig faculty. So Shabbos, you have all the holiness beyond anything, plus the pleasure, it gets 7. So it's just interesting, this literally happened this week, how we might short sell Shabbos because we get it every week. And we don't always remember how enormously powerful Shabbos is. Okay, so we understood our first question. What in the world does Shabbos have to do with limitless?
Can I add to
Sure.
something you just shared? I remember once my husband was sharing a mimer that the levels of, maybe it was Torah, that the levels of Shabbos, like Shabbos I think comes from Atzilos. Like the Yom Tiv comes from Bria, but it's level of Bina, which is Simcha, and that's why Yom Tiv is so joyous, and you feel so elated on Yom Tiv. But there's still like a deeper holiness in Shabbos because it comes from a higher place.
Wow. That's so interesting. I never knew that. I always did know this concept in general, in broad terms, which is that Shabbos is holier than any Yontif, even though we don't think of it as holier because we get it every week. And Yontif, we get each Yontif once a year. So Yontif to us seems more special, but, met a lot of Hasidus touches on that concept, that Yontif seems more special, or as you're saying, Yontif has the joy factor. But in terms of holiness, a lot of different places in Chassidus bring out this idea how Shabbos' holiness is beyond any Yontif. But I never knew this about Atzilus versus Bria, so that's very interesting. So that, connects to why. I think in Chassidus, usually it expresses the idea of how Shabbos comes from Hashem and Yom Tovim we create, right? Because the Yontif is coming from the calendar, from the sanctification of the moon that ultimately goes back to the Jew. But Shabbos is embedded in the Bria. Shabbos is sanctified from above. Shabbos isn't sanctified by us. Shabbos is sanctified by God. So that gives it a totally different dimension of holiness. But the Rebbe says, expanding on this question, not only is Shabbos seemingly so time-bound because it starts on Friday at a certain time and ends on Saturday at a certain time, but more than that, Shabbos only comes after 6 days of a week. So Shabbos is really earthbound, really time-bound. You need 6 days to get to a Shabbos. And not only that, the Rebbe says, it's even more than that. As our sages say, Misha Tarach be'erev Shabbos, Yochel b'Shabbos. Who eats physically and spiritually on Shabbos comes from the work they do physically and spiritually before Shabbos. So it's not just, okay, there's 6 mundane days and then we have this beyond time dimension called Shabbos. No, those 6 mundane days are very tied into whatever we're going to get out of Shabbos. So it's even more establishing seemingly very strong, finite walls, so to speak, around the Kedusha of Shabbos. So if it's so strong that finite dimension of Shabbos herself, the 6 finite days that precede it, the link between those 6 days and Shabbos, why in the world would emphasizing the Shabbos, prioritizing the Shabbos, rejoicing in the Shabbos, create something that's clearly not the Shabbos, create limitless energy? That's the question. The first question. The second question the Rebbe says, and then we start with some ideas about Shabbos, is what is so special about Shabbos that it outweighs all the mitzvahs? Meaning, we said, oh, why does Yaakov merit Ufaratzta, not Avraham? Because Yaakov kept the Shabbos. And then we said, wait a minute, and Avraham didn't keep the Shabbos? We said, well, of course, Avraham kept the Shabbos because he kept all the mitzvahs, as it says, V'shamartas mishmarti, and you guarded my statutes, my guard, my commandments. You kept everything. So we know Avraham kept Shabbos because he kept everything. But Yaakov, because there's a pasuk that alludes to him keeping Shabbos, his keeping of Shabbos was on a totally different level. And that's why his keeping of Shabbos created the limitless Nachal of Eretz Yisrael. There's this, wait a minute. We are saying that there is a pasuk that clearly says, not a drash on a pasuk, that Avram kept all the mitzvahs. And we're saying, and Yaakov, we're darshaning off a pasuk that he kept Shabbos. And because Yaakov kept Shabbos, he has the Nachla B'li Meitzarim, he has the limitless energy that Avram couldn't inherit. There says, you're saying keeping Shabbos is more valuable than all the mitzvahs, which obviously include Shabbos? Avram kept all the mitzvahs, including Shabbos. It's literally written in the pasuk, but Yaakov's keeping Shabbos, as alluded to in the pasuk, outweighs all the mitzvahs, which of course includes on some level Shabbos. So what in the world could the power of Shabbos be? That one mitzvah can give something that the totality of the mitzvahs can't give. So obviously what we want to understand in this mimer, and on the level of a mimer, obviously we're going to understand this deeply, is what is this power of Shabbos? So continuing, now obviously we're not going to get a complete answer now, but fear not, it's Thursday night, tomorrow night Shabbos, so without even knowing the answer, I'm sure all of us will really try to rejoice on the Shabbos and have 3 meals on Shabbos and do whatever we can because we don't know it, but we definitely know it's worth it. So to speak about the Shabbos, the Rebbe says, going to Ice Bays, that it's explained in many Maimarim that there are 3 aspects of Shabbos. There's the night of Shabbos and there's the day of Shabbos. Well, that's 2, correct? But the day of Shabbos has 2 levels. Like remember we said before, all who eat the 3 meals of Shabbos merit this limitless inheritance of Yaakov, this limitlessness of Shabbos energy. 3 meals, 3 aspects of Shabbos, night of Shabbos, and 2 aspects of the day of Shabbos, which we could connect to the Suda by day and the Suda in the later part of the day, towards the end of Shabbos, Suda Shlishis, Shal Shudas. So those 3 Sudos are really parallel to these 3 energies embedded in the Shabbos herself. This is a plug for all of us who don't have 2 meals on Shabbos to try to have one in some fashion, so we get the merit of all 3 dimensions as expressed in all 3 meals of the Shabbos. So when we're looking at...
Is it still counted if we switch the order?
Yeah, I think so. Well, you know, it's interesting because I know in my family we did that very often for many years. We would switch the order. So I believe it works because I don't think my husband would have done something if halachically it didn't count. So I don't know spiritually exactly how that works, but yes, there must be some validity to it because For years we did that. But again, according to the Alter Rebbe, to be Vayetze Shalashudis, Zainis, a fruit. I sometimes wonder, because we eat all the time, right? But does a person have to have in mind that it's Shalashudis to be Vayetze? Or if you just happen to be eating, because like we do that activity, does that also count? I don't know, and I guess it probably does, for sure, on some level. But how much more so if you actually are focused? And what journey means is, if you were in shul and you had the kiddush, so you made kiddush because your husband hasn't come home, so you have your kiddush and your mezainis, that's in essence your shalshudas. And then a few hours later, your husband comes in and then you wash. Well, that was your seuda, and those are your 2 meals, but in the inverse order. But I'm saying, we for years we did that. Not now, just different dynamics in the house, but for years that's how we did it, and I'm sure it must be valid because we definitely did it for years. So the Rebbe says there's how do we mark these 3 dimensions, right? We're saying there's the spiritual dimension of night, and there's 2 spiritual dimensions by day. So we said, and the Rebbe says, by the meals, right? The meal Friday night, the meal Shabbos day, and the 3rd meal are marking the 3 dimensions of Shabbos. All of the meals are also accompanied by the tefillos, meaning Friday night, there's a Friday night Seuda, and there's the davening Friday night, Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv. The Kabbalah Shabbos, Ma'ariv, and Seuda together are expressing, or how we utilize, and how we tap into the energy of the spirituality of Friday night. The tefillos of Shacharis and Musaf and the Seuda is how we express and utilize and tap into the energy of Shabbos day. And the tefillos of Mincha and Shalashudis are how we tap into, and of course that energy the Rebbe always would speak about. The Rebbe always refer to it, Raiva de Raivin, right? It means Raiva is Aramaic for will, Ratzon. And so many times by Farbrengen, the Rebbe would, because of course the Farbrengens extended until, or sometimes beyond, that time of Shabbos. There were I remember hearing so many times from the Rebbe that idea of Raiva de Raivin. This is the ultimate energy of Shabbos. And it's so interesting because it's just like, I know like every year I go through this when I speak to, let's say, modern Orthodox women, let's say, Litvish women, and I always tell them Pesach, Passover, the highlight is not the first 2 days because things build. So the highlight of the holiday is the end. Shvi shel Pesach, Achron shel Pesach. The last 2 days, the first 2 days, we're celebrating redemption from Egypt. The last 2 days, we're celebrating the redemption of Mashiach. And then this culminates, and the 7th night when you stay up all night learning, and then the Kriya by day, and you're supposed to envision Kriyas Yamsuf and literally experience it. And then the last day and that Haftarah and the most beautiful Mashiach prophecy. And then you come to the end of Passover, of Pesach. Sudas Mashiach, you're imbibing, you're ingesting Mashiach energy. Wow. Now to us, that's sort of normal because we're used to that. But out there in the world, that's honestly not how they think of the holiday. And it's really like, oh, the first 2 days of Pesach, whoa, that's a spiritual high. And then the rest is whatever, finishing off the holiday. So similarly, for us as well, we could think of our most beautiful meal on Shabbos is Friday night, right? You have all the hot food on your blach. You serve all your best food then, Shabbos day, even if you have whatever, you're having some cholent, I remember once learning that when you have chalas, your bigger or larger, better chalas should be by day and not by night. I remember that was hard for me because Friday night, everyone wants a challah. It's fresh, it was just made, it's delicious, and everyone's eating the challah, and Shabbos day, everyone does you a favor and has a piece. So why am I going to put the bigger challahs by day and the smaller ones by night? Because there's a certain spiritual energy by day that's stronger than by night, because it's building. Similarly, if you have a special salad, you have one special salad, enough for one meal, when are you supposed to serve it? Are sages saying when you're supposed to serve it? Yes, they do. You're supposed to serve it by day. You're by day? No one's interested in my food by day. They're all doing me a favor. They're all going to gobble something and run away and go to friends or take a nap or learn and say Tehillim, they don't care. Friday night, they're interested. No, you're supposed to serve it by day because the godliness is building. So there's the godliness of Friday night building even more the godliness of Shabbos day as expressed in the tefillos and as expressed in the meal. And therefore, in the meal, we should do things that show that the day meal has a chashivas, has a specialness over the night meal. And then the climax, just like I Pesach to the rest of the world when they're so clueless, it's the climax. They think it's the aftermath, but it's the climax. So similarly for us every week, the climax of Shabbos is Raiva Derivin. The climax of Shabbos is not your Friday night meal and your Friday night tefillos and you're singing L'chadaidi, and it's not your Shabbos day meal. Okay, you make an effort and you have all those long tefillos of Shabbos day and long Kriya. The climax is, it builds, it's ascending. The climax is the tefillah, mincha, and the suda, shalosh shudas, that little suda of Raiva Derivin. That's the climax of the energy of Shabbos. And the Rebbe is about to unpack the tefillah of Raiva Derivin, of the Shalosh Shudas time, and show us the special, special energy there. So I know we're just beginning, and it'll take us a while. This is a longer mimer. I mean, we've done many long mimarim, so not longer than we're used to, but, not a really short one. But just even a taste of what we did so far, I'm thinking, because it's Thursday night, and I mean, hopefully we won't have amnesia till, tomorrow night, having in mind, trying to enjoy the Shabbos, the Gashmis. As human beings, take joy in the Shabbos, take pleasure in the Shabbos, have your 3 meals of the Shabbos, and try to feel there's some ascending holiness that I'm trying to tap into as I go through the tefillas and the meals of the Shabbos.